So my name's Haskel. I'm a four-year senior here at Berkshire. And for the past 2 summers, I've worked for a political newsletter. Specifically, my role as a researcher in US politics has given me an almost unfiltered understanding of the state of political polarization in the United States. Our world as a whole has become increasingly political. Scholars may disagree on the extent of our polarization, but it cannot be denied that we are divided in politics. While the world as a whole has become increasingly political, the United States remains a top contributor. Pew Research poll shows that the percentage of Republicans with a very unfavorable view of the Democratic Party has risen from 21% to 62% from 1994 to 2022. Similarly, the percentage of Democrats with a very unfavorable view of the Republican Party has risen from 17% to 54% over this timeline. And Pew Research isn't the only place reporting this either. Places like Vanderbilt, The Economist, and the Carnegie Middle East Center are reporting the same trend. Americans have trouble getting along when it comes to politics. Now, there are many reasons for our political polarization. These include media bias, party identification, fake news, and so much more. Yet in my mind, the single biggest contributor is the lack of civil discourse. Civil discourse is at the very center of our political system, from the dinner table to our presidential debates. And many Americans lack this skill. In fact, our very government, our Constitution, was created after months of civil discourse between our founders during the Constitutional Convention. Yes, many Americans may agree that this skill is important, but we fail to effectively execute it. A poll shows that almost 50% of Americans have stopped talking to someone because of their political opinions. Instead of being curious and saying, hey, tell me more about your opinion, we simply stop trying. Personally, I grew up in a household of parents with directly opposite political beliefs. Regardless of their differing views on political decisions, my parents learned to foster an environment of love. I will not lie, this book by Dr. Janine Safer sits in our living room. I share this anecdote not to say that we are perfect at separating politics from the people. We aren't. I share this anecdote to give you an example of what it looks like when we separate politics from the people. In my mind, the way to fight our issue with civil discourse is through something called brave spaces. Brave spaces are spaces of growth, of innovation. In a brave space, more than one viewpoint is allowed. Instead of one viewpoint, we have multiple viewpoints come together to create collective solutions and problem solving. In brave space moments, we can create growth within our community. As brave spaces has become a term adopted in the university setting, there are a few pillars that have become specifically adopted. These are vulnerability, perspective talking, embracing fear, critical thinking, examining intentions, and lastly, practicing mindfulness. I want to give you a quick rundown of each of these pillars. First, vulnerability. We have to be vulnerable. Vulnerability means not self-censoring yourself based on what somebody may think of you. Vulnerability leads to innovation and growth. Next, perspective talking. Perspective talking is the idea that everybody comes from different experiences and backgrounds, and these experiences affect our political opinions. We don't have to necessarily agree with somebody, but we must be curious about why somebody has a political opinion. Don't be judgmental, be curious. Embracing fear is similar to vulnerability that takes courage. We must take risks in hard discussions. Critical thinking is a way of self-examining ourselves. It's the fact that we may not be right, we may have limited thinking. Examining intentions is another way of checking ourselves, but in a different light. Examining intentions asks questions like, why am I saying this? What is my part in this discussion? Which leads me to my last pillar. My last pillar is practicing mindfulness. This pillar gives way for the other 5 pillars. It means being part of the discussion, being part of the solution, being engaged. So you may ask, what is the difference between the commonly known safe space and a brave space? Well, a safe space is a comfortable space. A brave space is a space for growth. I want to give you the exact definition of a safe space by Oxford Languages. A place or environment in which a person or category of people can feel confident they will not be exposed to discrimination, criticism, harassment, or any other emotional or physical harm. There's 2 limitations on this that I want to point out. The first is, we can never be sure that no emotional harm will be brought upon somebody during a contentious topic. Like I said, we all come from different backgrounds, we all carry different scars throughout our daily lives. So, during a hard conversation, we don't know what different connections people have to an issue. I want to tell you a story. I grew up with a friend that for our purposes we can call John. Now John and his brother are originally from Guatemala. And I remember sitting in my 7th grade history class on an afternoon when a debate about the border and immigration sprung up. I looked over as John piped into the conversation. And I swear for 5 minutes, every person in that classroom solely listened to John. Because John was able to create a real human connection to the issue. He was able to communicate to us why he felt it was so important. I learned more that day because of that connection that John shared than I have in a classroom about this issue ever since. John, in this scenario, was comfortable enough to share his story. That does not mean that brought no emotional harm onto him. This is an example of a brave space, not of a safe space. The second limitation I want to bring up is the idea that in a safe space, criticism is banished. I say bring on the criticism. In a basic sense, criticism occurs every time a teacher grades a test. Without criticism, we live in a fairy tale world where everybody is perfect. In our own political system, we have Republicans and Democrats that lead the way. While they may often criticize each other too much, their criticism allows for a term we often use called checks and balances. We can check, in our government, they check each other's power because of differing opinions. To pass a law, not just one opinion, but two have to say yes. This, in turn, better represents the ideals of the American people. I want to give you another thought experiment. Imagine you're a high-level athlete, and you reach out to your coach saying, "Hey, I'm struggling a bit. Can you help me?" Would you rather your coach say, "Everything's perfect, don't worry"? Or would you rather your coach pick out something really specific and say, "Hey, I actually do see something. Maybe we can work on it together so you can become a better athlete"? As an athlete, I pick the latter. In short, a safe space is a comfortable space. A brave space is a space that leads to growth and innovation. There will be moments in a brave space when somebody takes offense to something that is said. That is okay. This creates more teachable moments than the artificial bubbles of a comfortable, safe space ever will. So, let's bring brave spaces to the world. We'll pause. That's really hard to do. So why don't we start with Berkshire? Here are a few things we can do in our own community to lead the way. Be curious. See criticism not as a personal attack, but as a moment of growth. Listen to understand rather than to respond. Take deep breaths and slow down. Let's face our fear head on, dive into our curiosity, and be vulnerable. It's time to see disagreements not as a problem, but as a catalyst for change, progress, and growth. Today, we live in an incredibly difficult political period. Just 3 days ago, Americans went to the polls to select the next president of the United States of America. This election has and will continue to create tensions between people. So, it is important as ever to create environments where collective and diverse ideas are celebrated rather than suppressing them. Thank you.